everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Richard Lewis Show. I'm your host, Richard Lewis, and a very special guest this time around. It is, of course, the esports host. There's much more women than that. Radio host, commentator, super physical specimen, MMA enthusiast. It is OJ Borg. And I'm starting there, mate, because I've been calling you OJ Borg all this time. And I listened to your radio show, and I thought, fucking hell, they've recorded that stinger wrong, calling him OJ Borg, but then apparently I've heard you refer to yourself as Borg. So,
well, I don't know how you pronounce my own surname. So my full name is Oliver James Borg D'Anastasi, which, let's be honest about this, is ridiculous. And the reason I don't use D'Anastasi is the fact that even I can't spell the second part. So if I get stopped when I'm having to do official stuff, and you're saying your name to whoever, the bank, and they'll go, oh, okay, sorry, D''A, and I get confused. So I don't use D'Anastasi for that reason. But Borg D'Anastasi, I always thought it was. And I spoke to my dad recently. My dad's Maltese, the surname's Maltese. And he told me, actually, it's Borg. And I was like, I swear you told me like 15 years ago that the surname is Borg. So go with what you want. I'm fine with anything. I do not mind how anyone pronounces my surname.
I mean, I think you've definitely been called Borg at these esports events.
I'll take it.
Mate, it's the cooler name. It makes you sound like some unstoppable force, just assimilating everyone in esports into one homogenous, perfect interviewer. You know? Yeah.
Do you know what? The Borg that ruined my life for a while. When I was at school, the Borg came out. Yeah, and it was all like, you're going to assimilate us. And it's like, yeah, very funny. And then OJ Simpson as well ruined my life for a bit, where people kept saying the words white Bronco to me. And I was like, I don't understand what you're on about. Because obviously a lot of that story sort of permeated the UK, but not massively at the time. So, yeah, but can I say, and I think it's always good at the start of any chat you have to blow smoke up somebody's bottom. May I say, I'm excited to talk to you. I think we've only ever really bumped into each other a few times at events.
We had that very, very suspiciously late night at Gfinity, I think, was one of our better interactions.
Yeah, but I'm a massive fan, mate. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of you as a writer and many other things. But as a writer, you're one of my favorite sports writers. And I count esports the same as I do any other sports. But you are somebody who writes with elan, somebody who writes with intelligence. I don't always agree with what you say, but they're my favorite writers. I don't always agree. And I like somebody who puts out a point of view where I can see what they say and agree or disagree, and I'm always interested. So excited to chat to you.
Well, yeah, it's nice of you to say that. I mean, I think, and this is we'll start here since you brought it up, and then we can move into some other stuff. But yeah, it's a strange time, isn't it? Because much like yourself, the thing I used to enjoy doing when I was younger was reading iconoclasts, and you like to say people I wouldn't agree with on principle on a lot of things, and a lot of the writers that inspired me on a technical level said things I just couldn't get on board with. I mean, I remember, Hunter S. Thompson was a huge inspiration, right? My gaming name was Dr. Gonzo. I fucking loved
Dr. Gonzo.
Yeah, I loved all of that shit, mate. I mean, his writing was a breath of fresh air. My dad, when he was in prison, gave me a copy of Hell's Angels. That was one thing that we would talk about on visits, right? He'd read the book, he gave it to me. I must have been about 10. So it was in my mind from a very early age. And so when, there were lots of stuff. I mean, Hunter S. Thompson was like just a ridiculous kind of, polemicist when it came to politics. He held some like mad extreme views of like, conservatism, like, and things like that, because he was so ultra liberal, even though by today's standards, he'd be a libertarian or center right, which is great.
He changed the way writing. I mean, if you read, obviously, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, you read those books and you realize how he involved himself in the story, I think changed how journalism worked, because what you had was before him, you had journalism, and you had journalists. But when you read him, and Fear and Loathing is one of the best films of all time. I love a film with a great start, and anything that says we were halfway into the desert when the drugs took hold, I think is a great start to any book and any film. So yeah, and I love people who write A, with personal experience, or B, with a viewpoint which comes through knowledge and life. And that's not saying that you have to be 40, 50, 60, 70 to write a great article in my mind, but I like it written with people's experience and people's voice in there. And I think one of the hardest things you can get, and I think this applies to writing, I think it applies to presenting, to broadcasting, whatever you call it, is the ability to have a voice that is you. Authentic's the wrong word, because that sounds like you're trying to make it up, but it's the voice that is only you. Well, and the only person who can write like Richard Lewis is Richard Lewis.
Well, so tell me if this is your experience. Obviously, you work in broadcasting, so you've probably had to go through this yourself. The first lesson I tell people and it's a cliche, but all of that stuff you learn when you're at college is bollocks. They tell you how to write an essay, and then no one wants to read a fucking essay, mate. They're boring. No, and all the bad habits that you pick up from essay writing, you have to deconstruct that to be an authentic writer. It is okay to use incorrect grammar sometimes to make a point. You can play
if you want to.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to know that you. I mean, if we're talking in cliches, just because something is a cliche doesn't make it not true.
Also true. Cliche. Yeah.
You have to know the rules before you break the rules. So you can't bust in and go, right, I'm going to write like this, because you have to understand the discipline of writing and knowing that yes, you can break the rules, but you still have to make something which is readable and takes a certain amount of time to read and isn't. There's certain writers that I love. Marina Hyde, for instance. I mean, a lot of my writers are all left wing, and I think Marina Hyde is a brilliant writer. But at times, I find myself confused at which way she's gone, because she almost feels to tie herself in knots. But yeah, I think an authentic voice is what I love to read, and that's what you've got, Richard. And may I blow smoke up your ass with that? Do you know where the phrase "blowing smoke up your ass" comes from?
I have the Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable over there, and I haven't got to that one yet. So
so apparently, and this is, feel free to fact check it because you'll probably be wrong, but it was a Dutch method that when people drowned in Victorian ages, they thought they could bring them back to life by putting an anal furnace up their arse and blowing smoke up it, and they thought it was a way, obviously, of drying them out and bringing them back to life.
That's crazy. No, I had no idea of that phrase, and I'm not going to fact check it. I'm going to assume it's real. But let's talk about you. I mean, is any of that lesson true for you? Because I know that you studied this, right? I mean, this is your craft.
Well, to an extent, yeah. I mean, I went to uni and did professional broadcast.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really mean anything. I didn't learn anything at uni. I went to uni simply to get out of Leicester, where I was living, and to give myself the chance and the time to throw myself into anything that was free. I mean, the problem was it took me years to get anything. I mean, I was on hospital radio stations. I was on Channel M, which was like a small radio. Anything that anybody wanted, I did as much as I can, because I think it takes a long time to be yourself, especially in front of a camera, in front of a microphone. You spend a long time putting affectations on. And also it takes a long time to still be able to create, even at your worst, to still be able to be decent. And I think that's the thing you learn with time. So yeah, I had to find a voice that was me. I'm not saying I'm the best presenter around. I'm not saying I'm the best radio presenter or the best broadcaster. I'm the best me. And that's all you can ever be. And if people dig on what I do, then that's great. If they don't, then they're not going to hire another OJ, because no one can do what I can do as well as I can. They might be able to do the job better. I'm not saying I'm the best at the job. I'm just saying I'm the best at being me. So I studied it, and it took me a long time to get to anything near that. But that's partly because I like a party, and I haven't always been the most diligent of person. I'm a slacker with a perfectionist mentality.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I got a bit of that too. Like I am a slacker, right? In the sense that I don't even like being on camera. I don't like being made up. I don't really care about the way I look. I'll happily turn up to a bar like a sack of shit tied in the middle. I don't care. I regularly, when I was living in Vegas, mate, because you see it all out there, I used to just fucking wander around in a dressing gown, gut hanging over my fucking boxes like Tony Soprano. I didn't give a fuck. And so, I've got a slacker attitude, but the work matters so much to me. It's the one area of life where I have total discipline and focus. I will not let the work suffer, because that's the legacy.
But you're better than me. So
right, okay.
I literally am. I sometimes don't. I feel sometimes like I don't achieve, because I'll be like, if I can't do this to the best of my ability, then I'm not going to do it. And then I just can't be asked to do it properly. So I just don't do it. But I would say, to refer back to my earlier point, that I've got to a point where even sometimes when I'm being a slack ass, and I can be, I think I personally can be, that hopefully I can blag it slightly, as it were.
Well, I think you've got to have a little bit of that cheekiness as well, right? Like, I mean, that's part of the charm. And in a role that's essentially crowd facing, like what you do, or public facing, and like what you do, I think actually it helps you to be a little bit demystified, a little bit relatable by, giving people a cheeky wink while you're doing it and saying, I was up late last night, or you make a mistake. Most people's inclination, if you get a name wrong or something like that on stage, they panic. They shouldn't have done it. They try and correct it. I've seen you like misspeak and just lean into it as a joke and make it part of the show, right? And like that is part of the unique charm of what you do. It's why you're good at what you do, because yeah, I think it's relatable to the general public.
Well, yeah, I think real life. And obviously, like, my day job is radio. So I do 5 nights a week on radio too. And a lot of people on radio now pre-record things. And pre-recording means basically you will think, right, I'm going to do a link about this, or I'm going to do this competition about this, and I am going to record it. And then that means we can edit it. So when it goes out on the air, we take out all the the stumbles, the mistakes, and it sounds perfect. Yeah. And I have a real problem with that for a few reasons. One, I believe live is brilliant. The reason for radio, the reason for certain things, the reason people love radio is because it's happening right now. You could say anything that takes that radio station off air. It's almost the beauty of listening to, if you remember Jonathan Ross on the radio, you listen to Jonathan.
I used to love Jonathan Ross. Yeah.
Jonathan Ross obviously came a cropper with some of the things he did on the radio, bizarrely on a pre-recorded show, which is another thing. But what was great about him was there was that danger. There was that danger that any moment he could say something which was not just going to bring himself down, but bring the radio station and everything else down. That crashed the ship because you're in control of this big juggernaut. So I think A, people like reality, and B, if you make a mistake, and I make mistakes all the time. I'm tired. I trip over my words. I will misspeak. I'll get a name wrong. I will trip over. I think A, people like hearing that because that's the real life, and real life is messy and it's a mistake. And I don't know any conversation I've ever had in real life where I've got everything completely right and I've been intelligent and people that you get things wrong. Life is getting things wrong. So I think people like that relatability of the fact that you're not perfect, because none of us are. And secondly, it is just that real life every single time. So if I have to lean into it, then I have to, because that's the only way of doing it. Otherwise, I set myself up for a level of perfection that I'm not capable of.
Yeah. So look, all that training, when did you, and all that experimentation and working hard? I mean, I've done a hospital radio show as well. I did some stuff over on New Style FM in Birmingham, if you've ever heard of them, local radio over here. Typically aimed at the African community. So it was great to work over there. And the Caribbean community too, because we've got a big strong Caribbean community in Birmingham. And I learned a lot doing that. I learned a lot about the technical aspects of how to speak in blocks and how to articulate points in small little digestible
word
chunks.
Economy.
Yeah,
word
exactly.
Economy.
And ironically, you've just explained that entire idea in two words when I failed to do so. So again, you're better than me at this. It's like I learned so much. And by the time I came to esports and I felt comfortable being on a podcast and being on camera, it was assimilating all of those like amazing experiences I had. And I'm like, yeah, the product is me. The whole time, the product was me, because I am the only person that can be me. And it's just about finding the tools to express yourself in the right way. So when do you think you arrived at that? Have you arrived at that?
I think I have arrived at it, which I guess sounds like I'm being cocky, but only because I do 15 hours of radio week in, week out. So I had to arrive at it. But I failed for a long time. And the reason I failed for a long time is I was not uncompromising about always being myself, but a lot of commercial radio, which is the world I came out of, I never really succeeded in it, because most of the radio stations involved wanting you to say something very generic over and over again in a nice voice. And I always had ideas and I wanted to be creative and I wanted to do things in different ways. And I was always, again, not militant about just being myself, but I just was. And it was what I was. And I got sacked from a lot of places. But I have done so much stuff. But a lot of the stuff I've done was so under the radar, or in a world, we're similar ages, was in a world before anything got uploaded to YouTube. It was a world before YouTube, where nowadays you do anything, it's recorded for posterity. The idea of not being able to find something now is an anathema. You can find anything that happens. Anybody does anything and it's there, for good or for bad, which means that anybody makes any mistakes. I got to do things like Nuts TV, which wasn't as bad as it sounded. Okay, wasn't as bad. I mean, we did some stuff.
Although I think by today's standards, I mean, there's probably some cancelable content, if you want to call it
maybe
that.
I mean, the company,
I'm not saying you would have done any of that stuff, but
I mean, you can argue whether it's cancelable or not, whether there's a place for it or not. I mean, everyone got paid well for doing it. We had a feature every night called Blonde versus Brunette, where it was a blonde model versus a brunette model. Is that wrong in today's world? I don't know. A lot of the stuff we did, though, there was no nudity. We weren't to anyone. It was laddie because it was of a time, it was early noughties.
Yeah.
But we had great guests and we did some intelligent stuff. And I think everyone who was on that show went off to do bigger things. You had people who ended up running the One Show, which is BBC One Show. You had people who went to produce Charlie Brooker. I went off and did the lottery. There was producers and directors or people who do all these things. So I had to do so much stuff without really registering, to the point where people started to notice who I was. I'd done the air miles. I'd done the groundwork, to the point where I stopped making the stupid mistakes. I stopped saying the stupid things. I was able to be myself. So yeah, I think so. Could I be better? Yeah, everyone can be better. Will I get better? Who knows? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, that was a strange time, wasn't it, in the world, like, to have lived through, especially by the contrast today. You know, I always think of like Loaded magazine, you know, from that kind of time period. Which
it was ridiculous. Loaded. I mean, when I started working for Nuts, I was really excited. So we weren't owned by the same company directly that Nuts magazine was. So it was all owned by a big company at the top, and we were made by one arm of it and they were made by another. And I remember going for a meeting. I was hosting some darts and I had to go for a meeting with Nuts magazine. And I was really excited. And I was like, I'm going to turn up. There's, you know, naked people going to be playing ping pong. You know, people are going to be shooting beers in the corner. You know, it's going to be the most ridiculous thing. I checked how much money was in my account in case we all went out afterwards. You know, like, I was really into this idea of going to visit Nuts magazine. We had tea and scones in their very corporate cafe. In the building. And I was like, oh, this has just ruined everything for me.
Oh, I mean, it doesn't matter how radical the product is. The London media set is all the fucking same. You know, I resoundingly rejected that. You know, when I got out of uni, I thought there was a world where I could go back to the northeast of England and somehow still have a media job. And I was back in a fucking call center within inside of 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're starting to disperse jobs again around the UK, but we live in a strange time. I think COVID and the lockdown has made given everyone the ability to broadcast from home. Whether that's a positive or a negative, I don't know.
In my case, a negative for sure. Only a moment of time before I cancel myself, I think. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, that was just a weird time to live through. And it's like, I do think in a way, it is a shame that we've lost a little bit of that, you know, daring do and the ability to be a little bit naughty on a broadcast. Because I remember the Jonathan Ross scandal. I mean, it's ridiculous to call it a scandal. He made a prank phone call, and it was to Andrew Sachs, wasn't it?
It was Andrew Sachs's daughter.
Yeah, it was Andrew Sachs's daughter. And they did it live. It was him and Russell Brand. And they were just making up silly songs and leaving them on a voicemail. And it's like, I look back at that, like, I think Jonathan Ross got fired, and him and Russell Brand were doing a fucking apology tour for like what felt like 3 months off a pretty mundane prank call. Andrew Sachs lent into the bit as well and said, I can't believe they would bring my family. And it's like, oh, come on, bro. Like, you know the game. You were in fucking Faulty Towers. Like, fucking hell, that's getting turned off now. So yeah, it was just a weird time. But like, the thing I hate is that no one's allowed to even get close to the lines anymore, and it's made a lot of broadcast products unbelievably sterile and dull.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem we've got at the moment is everything will have to be sterile until we can find where the lines are again. And yes, I agree with you. And it's a worry. And doing a nightly live radio show, I worry nightly about saying something which is accidentally uncouth. You know, I worry about it all the time, and I try and double check everything that I know before I go on the radio to make sure that I don't do it, or if I have a live caller on, because everything I do is, as I've said before, is live. So I think we will get naughty again. I think we will start to be risque again, and I think it is starting to happen if you look at certain shows. But it's almost like we're coming out of the 1950s and 1960s. You know, obviously a lot of TV was very sterile. People were worried about offense and things like that. It feels like we've had to come out of this sort of wild Nuts TV, Loaded magazine, ladette and lads. Everyone's going to swear the word, and those sort of programs, which were ridiculous. You know, you look at what the Word got up to,
mate. I had to tell some of my audience about the Word. Because obviously,
what a show.
Yeah, I was trying to explain to them that bit, I'll do anything to get on TV, where they had do you remember they had the big woman on the exercise bike
and he licked
her armpit and then drank some sweat? It was like, fucking hell. Like,
he wore I don't know why. I don't remember what I did this morning. And all the important things in my life, like birth of my kids and stuff like that, is all really fuzzy. But in total clarity, I remember that guy licking her armpit. He had a bandana on, which was really badly tied, and he licked it and went, and he was on TV for licking an armpit and drinking some sweat.
Yeah, I remember when they had Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam go to the Jim Rose Grunge Circus and drink bile beer from this guy who he was famous for being able to digest anything. They had Marky Mark back when he was in the Funky Bunch, when he wasn't Mark Wahlberg. And he got in a fight with an audience member because someone shouted at him, "Use some Oxy 10 for his acne." I mean, that show was fucking chaos in a room. It was so insane.
Well, they had to remove the audience once.
Yeah.
Removing the audience. There was somebody who said something. I think it was a dancehall artist who said something particularly homophobic, and the crowd reacted badly to it.
I think it was when Shabba Ranks was in there.
It was Shabba Ranks. Shabba Ranks said something, and they had to remove the audience. And Mark Christian, who was, a northern DJ selected to do the show, perfect casting, really, when you look at it, was like, well, there's no one here. And then they did all the stuff with, who was the guy he did Tainted Love?
Oh, Mark Almond.
Mark Almond, yeah. They said something about a rumor about Mark Almond, which that
got them in a lot of trouble. That was about drinking the.
So do you think? Here's a question for you then. Do you think that sort of TV? Will come back to terrestrial, or is it now going to live?
I can't see
online channels.
I'll be honest with you. I think the problem we've got right now is we're entering a very strange phase for artistic expression in general. It's not just broadcast. It's not just TV. Listen, this isn't a big, woe is us, we can't, make racially insensitive jokes anymore kind of narrative, not that I ever would, but, obviously some people are out there right now, like Roy Chubby Brown's trying to fight Sheffield College Council over having a gig banned or whatever. But, I think we're at a strange point for artistic expression in general. There's an argument being peddled in Hollywood, for example, that, I saw it when the chap who plays Walter White, Bryan Cranston, he was playing a disabled guy in a wheelchair, and people were saying, no, give that role to a disabled person. And it's like, okay, maybe there is a disabled person that can do a fantastic job. But I mean, Bryan Cranston's going to ace it. He's like such a fucking fantastically talented actor. But now we're entering a phase where the acting component of acting is even coming under scrutiny. It's in literature too. They don't want writers, and this is a real thing in the literary movement. This isn't hyperbole. There's a growing pushback against writers writing characters that aren't from the same backgrounds as their own. And so I think it's like that's way more of a concern to me than having a show like The Word come back. But equally, I can't conceive of a world where we can ever be as eclectic or crazy as we were. And I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame because yes, bad things did happen, but I think good things came out of it too.
True. Just on the subject of the disabled actors not being cast in disabled parts, I guess if you're a disabled actor and a part comes up for a disabled...
it must suck to be passed over because, how can you not play the role perfectly? Exactly.
If you're a disabled actor, you're not going to get cast in, and the same argument comes, which is, so hang on a second here. Are you going to cast me as an able-bodied part? So the problem is, it is such an argument, like all these arguments. And I refuse to sort of, not because I don't have a voice on them, but because there are so many different facets to it. There's so many layers. Yeah. It's such an argument that you look at it and you think, well, you're right, and then you're right, and then you're right, and everybody's right, and then everyone's wrong at the same time. That we live in a febrile discussion where nobody can say anything, especially online, on Twitter and in other places like that. You can't say anything which is normal. The only way you seem to be able to have a voice online is by saying something which is completely outrageous. So you have to say something which is aggressive or disgusting or cancer. You have to say something which then gets you that notoriety. And I think is part of the problem, that we have these discussions via shouting. No one talks. There's no talking about it. And the problem is, if somebody's got an opinion which is proven over time to be wrong, there's no ability to be able to say, okay, my opinion was wrong, because everything's recorded. You know, your opinion is there for posterity.
Yeah.
So we live in a time where you can't change your mind, rightly or wrongly. And I that's what I worry about. I do think it will reset. I do think we're going to come out of the time we're in, where the boundaries we'll find will realign. We'll realize what we can do and what we can't do. Or even if you can't do it, there'll be a reason. You know, there'll be a reason why you can't. And if you do break it, then the penalty will be equal to the crime.
I've talked about this a lot on my other shows, you know, and it's like, I think what marks like the last sort of 5-6 years of discourse is arguments where both sides have points and really defensible positions, you know, freedom of speech, let's say, for example, versus
what is your point on freedom of speech? Go on, hit me with it. Because
I'm not an absolutist. I'm not an absolutist. I've never have been. I'm never committed to that. I think saying you're a free speech absolutist, I mean, like any position, it's unbelievably extreme. You really enter yourself into being aligned with things that I wouldn't agree with and would find unconscionable. You know, I'm thinking of like all those outrageous fire and brimstone hate preachers, you know, that telling people, homosexual people are bad and go out and do something about it. No, I don't support that and never would. And, you know, I don't know what the penalty should be for that, but I feel there should be some. And it certainly feels like having laws that say you can't say that is probably like the least of it. But then again, I do think when we get into almost absurd, never ending, and this is a preserve of the American left. They love this at the moment now. They basically dictate what you can say on the internet by their own cultural standards. And I really do take exception to that because, you know, for example, they're coming for the word cunt. And I'm not going to allow that as a fucking, you know, as a Brit. And certainly Aussies and Irish people won't either.
Because I always thought Americans didn't mind that word. And I made the mistake of saying it to some people.
Hey, they call it the C word.
So I thought they didn't like it. So here you go. Here's how I managed to get myself not thrown off a job, but I wasn't hired since. I was talking to somebody on a job I was on, and I was having a great time, lovely, everyone. And I went to dinner, and I went, you guys aren't offended by the C word. And there was a deathly silence, and I was like, oh, you guys are. And that was it.
I
managed to offend everyone. But I didn't think they did.
Oh no, they are. I've had like people like in.
I was lied to.
I've had people on a night out in America. I like people I'm good friends with. You know, actively say, "Oh, I don't like that word." To which I've said, "I don't give a fuck. I don't care what you like." You know. So and again, slippery slope arguments are ridiculous. But then you know, sometimes, but equally as well, like all of humanity's perched on a fucking slippery slope. We're so close to like a just total collapse at any given moment, you know, the collapse of ideas and freedoms and whatnot, that I think you do have to exercise some caution before you let more extremist positions around policing speech come in. So it's hard. I mean, there are no right answers. I can sympathize with anyone that feels demeaned by certain types of language that I guess would fall under the broad umbrella now of hate speech. I could totally appreciate that. But equally, I think once we start constantly adding to that, well, now we're going to have a problem in the long term because we're making so many, you know, it just feels like a never ending, every time there's a concession, okay, yeah, we won't do that anymore. You can have, right, yep, no problem. Yep. There's something else that we now need to talk about, and it veers into the absurd, you know, where there's premises that I don't even accept as being genuine, and rules we have to live by, right?
Yeah, it's one of those arguments. I remember when the full speech thing, as I was saying before, the free speech thing came up, and it was over Count Dankula and everything that happened with the Scottish courts. And I remember people who I admired and I respected from the comedy world and the writing world, and they ended up on different sides of this argument. And I remember thinking, but all of your points are right. So where, you know, I don't, you know, you're saying that people shouldn't be offended by it. You can't say things which are truly offensive to people. At the same time, you're saying that everyone should be able to say what they want. There's freedom of speech, but not freedom of consequence. And
yeah.
I remember just thinking, it's such a difficult conversation that nobody ended up really having it as a chat. It was all two entrenched positions with people shouting at each other.
Yeah, and this is what we don't accept. Like a big part of like, you know, the decadent West's problems all stem from the fact that we will not accept that some problems do not have elegant or neat solutions. We're absolutely convinced that with our superior brains, whatever position we're on, you know, wherever we're on the political spectrum, we can fix it 100% and make it totally right. And therefore, by extension, everything every other side says is ridiculous and absurd. Our way is the way to fix things. And unfortunately, we need to start waking up to the fact that there are some problems that just simply do not have any solutions. And the only way we're going to get into a world where there can be a little bit of happiness on both sides is through consensus and concessions.
Exactly that. And we're all fallible, horrible, messy human beings who do great things and do horrible things. I don't want to quote from a Jodie Foster film, but I shall. If you've ever seen Contact.
Yes, I have, yeah.
Ah, what a film. Wife hates it. I made her watch it once on her birthday and she's never forgiven me.
Wow.
But we watched that film. And I think there's a bit towards the end where they talk about the humanity, and he's an alien, whatever alien he is. And he says, you know, humanity is capable of such beautiful dreams, but horrible nightmares. And I think if ever there was a line that summed up what we are as humans, then that is it right there.
Yeah. And here we go. What a segue this is about to be. I hope you appreciate this one.
I'm ready for it.
That line sums up esports for me.
Does it?
Not just humanity. Oh, yeah, beautiful dreams and horrible nightmares. Absolutely. So I've got to ask, how does a polished radio broadcaster bumble his way into this hellhole?
Wow, it's not though. You see, so here you go. Here's how I ended up. So computer games and computers and me have always gone hand in hand. If you're the same age as I am, I think we were socially conditioned to love computer games. You know, when the first computers came out, my first computer was an Amstrad CPC 464. I remember my dad spending 2 weeks programming it to play Happy Birthday. It had a tape drive. Did you ever have to load
Spectrum 48K for me was my
exactly.
First. Yeah.
Do you know the first downloadable game was, and I saw this recently, it was a Canadian radio station played a game out over the radio, and you set your tape recorder.
You could record
it. So it was the first downloadable game, and this is whatever in the 80s. So, you know, I had that, and then, you know, consoles, mates had Mega Drives and the stuff that went with it. Then I went to university and, you know, it all became social gaming. And then when I couldn't see my mates and I had a life and kids and that sort of stuff, it became about online gaming. But the problem was I missed the growth of esports. Now, I actually, in a world before YouTube, had an internet show for a company called BT Pod Show, which was a guy from MTV had set it up with a load of money. And I interviewed a gamer, and it was OD. It was Michael O'Dell. And what game was he? What did he play? What was his?
I think he
game?
Started in Battlefield.
Okay, what did he play after Battlefield? Was it Quake? Was he a Quake pro at any point? Or
maybe.
Semi-pro?
I mean, you have to understand, Mike's like just a hardcore fucking. I mean, he's still. I was talking to him the other night, and he's still playing Warzone. Like he makes his kids watch. he's
50.
Yeah,
no, did you see he had the top on?
Yeah,
t-shirt.
Yeah, he's never going to stop me.
Well, I interviewed him about that, and you know, and I recorded the show, and it was about him winning whatever it was, 25 quid for winning online, and in a LAN. And my stepdad set up LANs at home, but I sort of missed the whole of esports becoming a thing, and then it going online and that sort of thing. And then later on, I'm at 5 Live. You know, after my career did whatever it did, and I'm at 5 Live, and I got asked, you know, like, you like computer games, don't you? I was like, yeah. Do you want to make a documentary on esports? And I was like, okay, then. And I dipped my toe into it, and we created this show which was called Rise of the Cyber Athlete, which we made for the BBC. And
they used to call them that too, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think it was very, very, very even-handed. We chatted to everyone, interviewed lots of people, did a load of work with ESL, went out and saw what they did, and it was the first time that the BBC had broadcast on Twitch. You know, no one within the BBC knew what Twitch was at the time. And it went really, really well. Off the back of that, the BBC didn't want to do anything else. So they didn't. They did do bits and bobs, but it didn't involve me. But I was asked by, I think it was Carmack. Carmack asked me, he was like, you know, do you fancy doing some presenting for us? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. You know, so I went out and did a few bits and bobs at Gamescom. And then off the back of that, I think I ended up in Cologne and did I think that was the first event. So that is how I stumbled into it, and I ended up on stage and doing the bits and bobs, and I loved it. And it was one of those things where I was immediately in love. And I've done stuff over my career, which I've just done for the money or for the fact that I needed a job at the time. I've done darts, I've done pit lane reporting, I've done anything because people
darts.
Well, mate, do you know what?
What
the fuck was going on? I was like hitting that one. But but when I did the esports stuff, I just was in love with it. And I am no knowledge on it, and I still have to have my hand held through what happens in the rounds. I can see the stuff which is happening in front of my face, but the more meta stuff I have to listen to. But the beauty of everyone I found in esports is their ability to convey what's happening. And I've always done this with the many different sports that I've worked on. My trick, and the only trick I've got, is listen to the commentators, listen to the casters, listen to the hosts, because they will tell you the story you need to know to ask a good question at the end. And that is it. And as I ended up doing that, I loved it. And I felt it was febrile, it was loud, it was passionate, it was beautiful, it was raw, it was everything I enjoyed about life played out in front of me. So it wasn't like working for me. It was like going to a great weekend and being part of it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there was a time there must have been a time I felt like that too. I don't know if you just get jaded and kind of beaten down when you do the same thing for a long time.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
God, mate, that's life, though, isn't it? Question for you, though. Question for you.
All right.
So here's a question. So you're somebody who came up through the scene. You are part of the reason the scene is what it is. You are one of the central pillars of esports in its many guises. What did you think? Because I would guess, part of a new world coming into esports, people who weren't endemic, people who were coming in and bringing outside knowledge. And I won't be offended. Feel free to hit me with what you thought.
Brother, let me be honest, right? So back then, because we're talking 2015, I mean, people probably don't realize how long you've been sort of esports adjacent, let's say. So for me, that was when I still believed esports could be saved. So I went out and got everybody. I brought in lawyers and said, like, we need lawyers. People are getting fucked over because they don't consult with lawyers, and people are doing illegal things, and it's all actionable. You'll have class actions for days. Please come to. I literally went out. I got lawyers in Europe and America and brought them in. Any broadcast talent, any mainstream journalists. I was, fucking regret that one. When I was literally pulling people into my world, like, who was skilled outside of it, and saying, trust me, you'll like it here and you can contribute something to it that we desperately need. So I was pulling people in to, like, try and save the ecosystem, because it was very sparse. There wasn't a lot of biodiversity, let's say. You had people like me who'd been endemic to the scene for so long, and that was about it. Our skills were ones we'd learned on the job, so to speak. So when a guy like you comes along from the BBC back then, that was like, fucking fantastic. More of that, please. Was my attitude. And you know what's weird as well? Like, you this is how I know you're just a generally affable guy. Usually the community fucking hate that. Right. And this is how you can tell that you clicked instantly with the community. Like, I can't remember a single thread about, like, what's this OJ Borg doing there? Who's this cunt? I can't remember none of that, mate. And
you've said the C word. I'm out.
Yeah, so no, I never saw that, mate. I never saw that, and that's rare. You and Casey Aitchison over at Dota are the two people I think of who were, like, really polished, clearly from mainstream media, that have come into our thing that the community just immediately fell in love with.
I love doing it. And I love the community as well. And I mean, the thing is, I've never really, I don't have a big social presence for whatever reason, not through want of trying at times. I don't have tons of people who follow me on Twitter or on Instagram or anything like that, which has, in the modern world, now holds me back. Yeah. Because I go for jobs, or I go to chat to people. And at one point I was trying to get signed by a very big American agency, and they were like, look, we love you. We love what you do. We think you're great, but you don't have big enough socials. So I've never really rated socially. But what I will take from the fact that I don't have a big social presence is the fact that I don't, and I never have, had a lot of hate online. I've always tended to, whatever I've done tends to be, well, this is, oh my God, this is this is me smashing the glass around me right now. Let me touch wood when I say it. It tends to be well received. You know, the majority of it, not all of it. God, no one's that good. So yeah, when I came into esports, I thought it was wonderful. And I got to a point, you know, and I was doing a lot, and I was doing a lot of shows for ESL, and I was doing like a weekly show, The World of Esports, that was being around the world. And I was flying to Copenhagen every week. And I got to a point where I had to make a decision. You know, Radio 2 came in and offered me a job which was 5 nights a week and immediately would curtail the amount of esports I could do. And it was at that point I was offered something else, and I had to make a decision between the two. And it was a sliding doors moment. It was, do I go down the esports route or do I take Radio 2? And I chose Radio 2, not because I think esports is any less and I wouldn't have had a great time, or maybe I would be happier, or maybe I wouldn't be happy, or maybe I would have made more money. I don't know, whatever. The reason was I chased Radio 2 for 15 years. You know, I chased it for most of my life, and it's the pinnacle of radio. And fair enough, the hours are slowly destroying me. I'm constantly jet lagged. I'm turning tiredness into an art form. And I don't regret the decision of choosing Radio 2, because I love it. I love the show. I love the people who listen. But I do wonder what my life would have been like had I followed through, moved to America and done that, because everything I ever did, I loved. Absolutely loved. There was nothing I did that I thought, why am I doing this?
Yeah. I mean, you know, like I can't blame you for taking I'll be honest. I've always wanted a radio job. I interviewed at Sirius, pitched for them way back when, although for a show that would have been actually got me cancelled. So I'm glad that never happened. But, you know, that's where that's my retirement plan, I guess. Like when I stopped being as much in the trenches about esports, I want to just have a little topical current affairs show where I give my takes on things that have happened in the news. It'd be great if I could get a license and play some songs between it.
See, the thing is, though, that my radio show I do is nothing like that. I mean, I am literally little with, you know, I mean, this doesn't translate if you've got an American audience, but sometimes I catch myself thinking, God, did I sound like fucking Alan Partridge there? You know, like there's the worst thing that ever got invented in the UK was a Twitter account called Accidental Partridge. Oh, because as a radio presenter, you just think,
it's all Richard Madeley anyway, so you haven't got to worry about it.
Yeah, but I say things going, oh God, that sounded a bit Partridge, didn't I? When a song says, what was it? I was playing, I can't remember. It was a song which was about Solid. And I was like, oh, you need some, you know, syrup of figs for that. And I was like, oh, God, you know, you've just made a constipation reference to a song. Does anything sound more Partridge than that? So, but what I don't, you know, it's not like I have a current affairs show where I talk about the things that have gone in the news. I make jokes about farts sometimes and dick jokes and try and relate that to an audience that isn't going to be offended by it. You know, but then that for me is the fun of radio, the ability to play a song and to talk maybe passionately about the song and then roll through that into maybe another thing we do and bits and bobs. I think there's a beauty in lots of broadcasting platforms, but radio is the oldest, one of the oldest, if you don't talk about print. And it's never really changed. It's still
it's never gone away either. I mean, it's like it's always been there. In fact, I mean, one of the startling things is, like, say, for example, in America, you know, it's hugely important if you're running for an election to have a presence on radio. You know,
is it?
Oh yeah. In
America or in the UK?
America for sure. Yeah, I would say over here as well. I think being talked about on BBC radio is vitally important. If you're a politician, you know, it reaches so many people. It's crazy.
It reaches a lot of people. But does anyone? You know, obviously, I used to work for 5 Live, which was a news and sports station. I do bits and bobs for.
Used to love them.
Yeah, a bit of Radio 4 every now and again, and I sometimes think we say so much, and there is so much that is said politically. And you know, I'll watch Question Time, and I will watch all these things. How much does the wider voting public, the people who are swing voters, you know, if you're politically active, I don't think you can ever really be a swing voter. Do you know anyone who switches from right to left who's politically active?
I do. I mean, you'd be amazed. There's been a strong uptake the last few years in some of the Labour heartlands. A lot of people have moved away from the Labour Party that I know that I never thought would.
But are they politically active? Are they political junkies? Do they listen to Question Time? Do they watch PMQ?
I mean, yeah, that is a good question. It sort of makes me wonder where they got the information to make that change from, right?
Does it come from social media? That's my point.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah,
You talk about radio stations, and you can be, you look at some politicians from both sides, and they've had nightmares where radio presenters, quite rightly, who are good at what they do, they're journalists, have caught them out. And sometimes it's not the hardcore political journalists that catch them out. There was an interview that I can't remember who did. It was on the One Show, and it was. I can't remember. Know him? Surely you know him. He won Strictly.
I mean, no, you have to understand. I live in the esports bubble, bro.
He's a dancer. He was interviewing David Cameron,
right?
And he literally said to David Cameron, "How do you sleep at night with the stuff that you're enacting?" Or was it a question which was literally, "Oh, how do you sleep at night? Do you use a feather pillow, or do you use a memory foam mattress?" And it was one of those questions that I think David Cameron struggled to answer. And that's the sort of thing I think sometimes that people who are true swing voters, who aren't political junkies, who don't watch PMQs, who aren't watching the minutiae of what happens within the people who are making decisions, that's where governments change, which is why I think the politics of personalities becomes so important, which is, do you literally like this person? Do they make you laugh? You will then vote for them.
Well, this is another reason as well. I mean, I think the radio is still super important, because think about how many of us, spend hours and hours in our cars on commutes, and, some people want to bump some tunes. Other people use it as a little moment of, privacy to sort of try and catch up with what's going on in the world, because we're all hooked into these crazy news cycles now, right? It's like, every day there's an apocalypse that you have to avoid. Someone is the target of the entire internet's ire for 24 hours. And you need to know all of this because you're involved too. And so I think a lot of people, it's like they might not have time to sit and scroll Twitter or sit down in front of their computers when they get back from work, Monday to Friday. The one thing they can do is listen to their, radios in their cars and get up to speed. So despite it being an archaic medium, just in terms of the tech, it's still one that's going to remain hugely influential for a long, long time, I think.
What else can you do? Can you drive your car? Can you iron your pants? Both American and English terminology with pants there.
Yeah.
Ever ironed your pants?
No, I remember one time I did have a friend who put his boxer shorts on coat hangers. Them little clippy coat hangers,
I did the Tour de France, and I chucked all my washing in to be done. We were in a hotel, so the Tour de France, 3 weeks on the road, whatever. I'd run out of pants like days before, and I chucked it all in. We got to this lovely hotel, and they had a laundry service, and all my pants came back, not just washed, but ironed and folded. And at that moment, I was like, "That's it. I'm going to." They
don't fuck around when you get it done in a hotel,
no. But they charge. I think it was £8 a pair of pants. I ended up spending like €200 on this. I mean, did I get it back? I don't think I did, but it was worth it for those £8 freshly laundered pressed pants. Man, I was like, "Yeah, this is heaven." As I slid them over myself.
Well, that's the other thing. So there's a good little segue there as well. You are a kind of sports enthusiast as well.
Yeah.
And ubiquitous across a lot of sports. You've mentioned cycling there. You obviously do that MMA show.
Not anymore.
Oh, you used to BT Sport, right?
Yeah, I used to do the BT Sport stuff, and I also did it for the BBC as well. And but the last thing I did was the Conor McGregor fight against Khabib over in Vegas. Which what a way to go out. Yeah. So what happened there then? Why come you're not doing that? Because I haven't seen. Can't travel. Don't have the time to travel.
Right, yeah, because is that the family and everything else?
Family, Radio 2.
Yeah.
My Radio 2 job is a full-time job. It anchors me, quite rightly. You make a choice. If you take a job which is in one place, it stops you doing other stuff. And I'm somebody who's always, I don't know, call it background, call it OCD, call it whatever, struggled saying no to work. I've always, if somebody says it to me, I will immediately try and make it happen just because, and especially when you spent a long time as a freelancer, always worrying that you're never going to have another job, you say yes to it while it's there. I mean, people, I've got friends of mine who have 9 to 5s who go, "Oh, it must be wonderful being a freelancer, having all that time off." And it's like, no, time off is being unemployed. You're literally unemployed if you've got time off, or you're worrying about what the next job is, and then you take everything, and then you worry that you've took too much on and you can't deliver it. It's that sort of thing. So no more MMA, because just no time to go and do it. No more cycling trips because there's no time to go and do it.
Regrets about that then?
No, not really.
I know it's hard because you've essentially got, the golden handcuffs. You've got an incredible job.
Yeah.
It's stable. It's regular. I'm sure it's very rewarding in a variety of ways, the least of which might be financial. Although that
the
too.
least of which. You're not going to see me on any BBC list, let's put it like that.
Any Twitch lists as at least to make it topical.
So the Twitch list is an actual leak, because I saw that they were talking about leaking it. So it's definitely there.
I was 1,811th. I'm amazed.
Out
of 10,000.
Whoa, mate, that's like top. That's almost.
And I never stream. I don't even stream. It's my community's fucking insane. I don't know why they keep giving me money, but it showed I'd made like $120,000 like in 2 years just on subscriptions. And it's like, I literally don't even stream 40 hours a month, So my community just loves me.
It's quality though, Richard.
That's again very kind of you to say so. Although the streams not so much probably, but that's just me rambling into that's what this is, isn't it? Let's be real. But yeah, it's like I think it was interesting because the reaction to that has been so bizarre. Like people are like, "Whoa, he's a millionaire." Yeah, why the fuck do you think he does it? Like, do you not? It's like everyone's had this epiphany about the industry the last couple of days. So that we're all making money. Yeah.
So that's the interesting thing. So I have always worked around the more fringe sports, or at least they were fringe at the time that I worked in them. So MMA, the time I was in it, was early UFC when I first started out, because I was hosting shows for Cage Rage down in London.
Cage Rage, right.
Cage Rage. And a lot of people down there were like, "No, I'm just a fighter. I don't want to do anything else." And they were always really dodgy about it becoming more professional. And a lot of the fans who had been around it from the start hated the idea that it was becoming bigger and their fighters were becoming better paid. And you think, well, hang on a second here, the fighters who are literally putting their lives on the line here, why are they not being paid properly? So if they're going to be paid properly, it needs media representation, it needs to become bigger, it needs to become sponsored, it needs to be something that people can, cause. Whoever needs to spend £1 million so everyone gets more money, there's more money in the system. And I found that in British NFL when I was doing bits and bobs around that, and other sports, cycling as well, really, that they hated. There was a certain type of fan, and I would guess maybe, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong, there's a certain type of esports fan who hated the idea of it becoming more professional and there being more media interest and it becoming more mainstream, because they wanted to keep it to themselves. They wanted to keep it as their own little secret. They didn't want other people coming in, because that meant they were sharing it. But the problem was, if you want the best people to be competing, people who aren't sleeping through and missing their matches for whatever reason that is, because they are pros, then it needs money in it. And I always struggled with those fans who were so, the problem was they were the most passionate fans, but their passion it was almost an abusive passion. It was a passion that restricted the scene from growing.
It's a selfish passion. They've got it in the FGC. I've talked about this a lot. It's why the FGC is radically different to a lot of esports. It's also why it's radically smaller, because think that could be one of the best viewing things ever, because more people play it. But it's populated by selfish assholes. And what do I mean by that? Well, they care more about going to a small event, and them in these stupid, unwieldy 128 player brackets, right, that run all day, that no sponsor's going to touch, and that no one can be bothered to watch. And they want that to be the principal form of event for their sport, just so they can enter them and say, hey, I played against Knuckle Do one time and he beat me 3-0. Being able to say that, and that is literally the argument. I remember when we were talking about how to fix the FGC, because I was the person that was like, FGC was the first ever esports event I attended. And they all tell me I'm not FGC, which is like, it's just crazy, I went away for a while. It doesn't mean, I don't have to fucking live it every second. I got other shit to do. But when we were coming out of E-League and I said, like, yeah, you'll love it, do Street Fighter. They've got some real characters. I was like, this is how you can fix this thing. You can have a local that's like a qualifier. And let's say the finalist from that is a wild card entrant into the prestigious events. And, if you do that, you've now got a two-tier system where, yeah, you guys down here might not make a lot of money, but there is still access to the pro level for you. And we can get sponsors into the pro level. And they said that's outrageous.
Why?
They've been attacking me for suggesting that for years.
But if esports is sports, if we're talking about esports as sports in the same breath, which I always have, and I whether that's right or wrong,
I'm the same, brother.
I've always thought, what you're talking about is someone's ingenuity and their physical skill besting someone else. For me, is sport, whether that involves playing rugby or American football or hockey or whatever, or playing StarCraft. It's still brain and brawn and whatever. Then surely what you want is the ability for people to go and be the best they can be. If the best they can be involves them being professional and that involves them being paid for doing what they do, there needs to be a structure to get people to that point. And I would be interested to know how the FGC worked with you at E-League. Because I remember watching it and thinking, that is a good shout. That is a good thing for E-League to do, because everyone knows Street Fighter and it's an easy name for people to turn on.
Yeah, the network,
characters were brilliant, and the fight, and the stuff that they say to each other is great. I love that rawness.
The network loved it. They loved the promotions we were able to do. I've still got a custom poster of me morphed half with Zangief, because that's when I was bald and rocking a beard and fat. Fatter.
More Dowsem now, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Or Branca. Maybe you're like a Brummy Branca.
Yeah, well, I'm bald at the back, mates. Don't let the spiky hair fool you. It's coming off for the major. But so there was loads of great. The network loved it, how it looked. They loved the content. The people that made the content loved it because there was all characters. They loved the pop-offs. They loved the energy. The people who didn't love it, all the pros who attended loved it. First time many of them had been in limousines or 5-star hotels, had catering brought out for them, had a green room experience. Were obviously on American national TV for the first time, some of them. All the pros loved it, didn't love it. The fucking community didn't love it. There were active community members, like bitter little journalists saying, Richard shouldn't be hosting it, or, they all found fault. We got accused of racism.
What was the racial?
Because, so we every day, we would, and you see, this because you've worked broadcasts, we would come in and we would have an ideas, creative meet about what we were going to do in the show. And so all of the talent were there, all of the commentators were there, producers are there, directors there, everyone, right? And we're kicking ideas around. And there was these two players that really didn't like each other. And really, not fake hype, not like to sell boxing where like Tyson Fury's hugging you, afterwards and says you're a good lad. I'm talking really disliked each other and had been very verbal about what they might do if they meet each other and stuff like that, tweeted at each other. So one of the ideas that came into the room was like, make it like WWE and say, look, we've got additional security, right? And obviously it's a fucking TV studio. The security
like the
everywhere.
Lewis fight, where you split them up in the middle.
Yeah. So we had I was getting death threats at the time. So there was 2 armed security guards on site because people had said they were going to come into the crowd and shoot me. So they were already there all the time. We just never put them on camera. And so I went to one of the security guards who essentially doubles up as my bodyguard. He walks me to and from the toilet. So we've got a good rapport because I'm a talkative guy. I said, listen, do you want to be on TV? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, like, we'll film you for the bit to say additional security in the room to stop these 2 people hitting each other for the fight. And he said, yeah, sure, that'll be cool. I went, brilliant. So everyone in the room loved the idea. And both competitors were black and the security guard was black. And we did the bit on TV and I came away from it. No problems in the studio, everyone happy. And then on social media, it was like, oh, look, they bring the police in for 2 black people. And I just couldn't believe what I was reading. And to this day, they still it's still maintained by prominent figures in the FGC that was like a really racially insensitive, horrible thing we did. I still can't see it to this day. And it was nobody in the room could see it. Nobody as it was happening could see it. Nobody after the fact could see it. And they were just so, the reality is they were just so dead against E-League. They would, because it wasn't organic and it wasn't authentic FGC, they were going to go with the most poisonous interpretation possible of anything we did. And it made me really sad. It sucked a lot of joy out of the broadcast and just to see that kind of, spite. And it wasn't a good feeling for anyone involved with the broadcast. It wasn't a good feeling for that security guard who's done nothing wrong. He's being held up as the face of like racism. It wasn't good for the competitors because they thought they'd had a great entertaining moment that's going to be on the highlights when we do the late night TBS weekend show. And it's all spoiled because these people wanted to use that as a weapon to beat us with.
I mean, I think what you did with E-League was great because I remember when I first came into esports, people were asking me, they were saying, oh, what can we do to make esports more mainstream and get it on terrestrial TV? And I remember thinking at the time, why do what everyone in terrestrial TV is talking about right now is how can we be more online and get more younger audiences engaged with what we do? And I was like, you guys, like esports, you've got it nailed. You've got hours and hours of people who are enthralled about what you do as a broadcast. And I think what you did with the E-League was brilliant in the sense that you did some great stuff online. You did stuff which was interesting, it was enthralling, and it worked for the community and that audience who wanted to watch hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and who had the ability to do that and to second screen it, but then still create a product which would bring in a wider mainstream audience. So I think looking at the E-League, anybody who wants to do anything mainstream with esports, which I still think maybe mainstream has missed the boat slightly. I don't totally know why in a world of mass broadband and mass connectivity, why you'd need to put anything onto terrestrial TV anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the point. I mean, look, I can talk about all this now that I'm no longer a TV guy. I mean, like the one of the principal concerns of a TV network was they wanted to do the cool new hotness, which was esports, because they need young people to be on cable TV, or they need to build a brand online that they can monetize where young people are going to be there. And so part of the strategy, I'm sure, was let's get young people hooked into TBS programming, and the younger we get them, the more they'll stick around. It was also at a time, I mean, TBS's big sports investment, well, there's two. March Madness, which obviously does really well for the basketball. It's the collegiate basketball. And obviously the other one's the baseball. Well, baseball's had a fucking nightmare lately because a season's like 160 games long.
It's madness. It's like rounders with spitting. I think I quite like baseball.
Yeah, well, and they've cut it down now. Obviously, we had a couple of seasons with the reduced seasons and everything, and but obviously, like they understand. Zoomers don't watch baseball. Not many of them. They'd rather be watching esports probably. So there was an aspect of that from the network, frankly.
It was good to watch though. The bits I saw, I thought were wonderful. And I thought it was always, to round it back up to the FGC, the fighting game community thing, was I always thought it was a great shout because I loved, I spent the entirety of most of my uni years trying to work out all of King's moves. Tag. And I loved it. My only problem with fighting games tends to be, it's quite boring. A lot of what I watch, if you don't understand the minutiae and you don't understand the timing and the rest of it, you think, oh my God, they're going to do all the special moves. But really it's about, this is such a agricultural layman's point of it. And I apologize when I'm offending when I say this, but you watch it and you think it's just a lot of down kicks and up kicks. And, unless you understand it, you don't see it. When I first thought I was about to watch pros play Tekken or play Street Fighter, I thought it'd be a lot more interesting, and it was never as interesting.
It's really on the commentators. I think too. I agree with that. It's like, if you're a hardcore player and you know what's going on, obviously, like any aficionado, you can enjoy it. But that's why the commentators at the top of the FGC are some of the best, universally across the business. And I still stand by that. And it's just a shame I haven't been able to do more work with them anymore, because the FGC is essentially a closed shop. If you weren't there at the start, they don't want you coming in now. And it doesn't matter who you are; they'll find a reason. That's for sure.
But then that's, I guess, I mean, I say this again when I spoke about you at the start, and I really do mean this. Is one of my favorite writers, sporting wise. I look at a lot of the people at the top of the esports world as commentators, mainly around CSGO, because they're the people I know more. Maybe Miles, who works in Call of Duty, and a few of the other guys. Yeah, their ability to tell a story is brilliant. And the pairs and the way they bounce off each other, and the humility and the humor, I think, is what's great, and I look at people who I respect within MMA. I look at people I respect around rugby and around cycling, and you always get different people who know how to tell a story. Because for me, sport has always been about drama. I love the storylines and I love the drama, and I don't care about the sport. You will always find the storylines. And I have never been an expert on anything, not anything at all. Never have been, never will be. Not because I don't want to be. I'm a bit too fly by night. I like everything at the same time. I can't specialize. I look at people like Machine, who is so within a scene, and I respect and I am jealous of his ability, that his life is what he does. And if you understand a scene so deeply, like you do, like Thorin does, almost like going to work isn't difficult. I look at Chad Burchill, like Sponge, and I think you understand this so well that what you do is so brilliant, and you take that knowledge. And everything I do has always been not a struggle, but I don't know it. I don't know it well enough. So I have to go into a scene and almost take a leap of faith, that ability to step into it. So I need those people to talk me through it. And when it comes down to it, it comes down to storylines. It comes down to drama. It comes down to that. Sport will tell the drama almost better than anything else. When you see that last minute turnaround, when you see somebody who hits a headshot against a 3-on-1, whatever it is, those storylines for me are what make sport. And that will come across anything, whether it involves a football, whether it involves rugby, whether it involves baseball, whether it involves esports and the defusing of a bomb, whatever it is. I love that. I love the drama of sport. That's why I'm there. And my only talent really has ever been the ability to listen to those stories and help tease those little strands out. And I think that's what's beautiful about it. So more commentators who can do that, whether it be the FGC or whatever, I think that's what we need. That's what everybody needs.
Yeah, it's nice to find the common.
I promised I wasn't going to cry.
Yeah, it's nice to find the commonality across all of the games as well. Were you surprised at the level that of people you found in terms of broadcast talent when you came in?
I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised at all. I wasn't, because they were brilliant from the start, from the first moment I heard them, and I listened, and I still think some of the most intelligent people I've ever met have been in esports. They're just so intelligent, so fucking intelligent, but not in an exclusive way, in an ability to tell a story way. Like, everyone is clever. I've not met a thick person in esports. Tell me who?
Let's not. But I could also just give you access to my Twitter account, and that'll fucking pop that little pipe dream you've got there.
Well, probably, but. I remember just being blown away. And this is having worked in the industry for like 20 years. I remember, especially, I was every job I did, I was not pleasantly surprised. I just looked at everyone and I was emotional about how brilliant they were at what they did, and how I wanted everyone to know how great they were. And I'd listen to them, and I'd listen to what they do, and I'd listen to the stories they tell, and their intelligence, not just with language, but with how they created it, and how quick they were, and how talented they were. And what it comes down to is possibly what we talked about at the start, which is how many hours do you have to do? What's the line? What's the line? It's you become an expert when
it's the 10,000 hours.
Is it 10,000 hours?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I feel a lot of people who come through esports, because they've done so many hours on their own in their room, and they do these 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour broadcasts. I think everyone hits 10,000 hours so early that they are experts.
I think that in itself can be a bit of a double-edged thing, though, because in terms of your competence, it definitely helps, right? But then the problem you've got is because we do so much content, I think the audience sometimes can get like listener fatigue. So, for example, any verbal tick you have is exacerbated. Any repeat go-to phrase you use, because the building blocks of language are, I'm starting a sentence here and I need to get to the point I want to make. And there's probably a bunch of shit in the middle I don't need, but I also have to say it in exactly 10 seconds. So here we go. So you get a lot of like building block phrases and
verbal crutches.
Yeah, verbal crutches. Yeah, verbal crutches. Yeah. And people notice them after 10,000 hours, 20,000 hours, and they turn on you for it in the audience. And it's like, it's not me. If you only heard me in small doses, you would think I was the best to ever do it. It's just, we spend so much time together, you as a fan, me as a broadcaster, that you've now noticed things that no reasonable, my wife wouldn't notice these things that I do because I spend less time talking to them.
Yeah. I do think at times the amount of content that's pumped out could be less within esports. I think you could have less content, more quality. Like I remember after I hadn't done a few esports events for a while, I came back in. I was like, and I started. And what I tend to do is my trick has always been, as I said before, if I listen to the commentators and the host while I'm at event, before I go there, I will pick out the people I think are the stakeholders or the key voices within a world. And whether I'm doing MMA or something like that, I will read everything they've written. I will listen to everything they've said, and I will listen to their points, not to parrot them, but just to know where the scene is at that moment. You're one of them, Thorin's one of them, and people around MMA and the rest of it. And I came back in and I was like, all I'm hearing here is anything I heard a year ago, because I think the CSGO scene was so overwrought with events, and I think possibly the COD community was, and everyone was. There were so many events, and everyone was playing each other at the same time. I was just like, I can't see the interest or the drama here at the moment, because it seems like it's fatigue, because you're watching these big 10-hour broadcasts one week, and then they're moving to a different event, and it's the same 10-hour broadcast with the same people on it and the same teams doing the same thing. Where's the interest? One team turns up and is tied this week and loses. And then next week, that team turns up and yes, they've had a bit of sleep, or maybe one guy his girlfriend has had whatever it was, whatever the reason was. And I think at times, maybe, as you say, people are watching you for so many hours, more than they're seeing their own families, that maybe they could make the broadcast smaller and more concise.
It's kind of funny. I got to a stage.
How'd you do that?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, I got to the stage where I was like, so for years, I was exposing the companies that wanted to come in and monopolize esports. I said to someone from one of those companies that I'd stopped just a week ago. I've been talking to loads of people online because I'm getting ready to slowly transition out, and I basically said, like, I wish I'd let you succeed. I would like to see a monopolized CS scene and what it looks like, because the kids have never played nice in the sandpit, and that creates the problems you're talking about. We've devalued the incredible product of Counterstrike because everyone wants to be the ruler of the ashes, and that's madness to me. But that's what's happened. I always thought it would fix itself, but you've very astutely observed the problem. Yeah. It doesn't matter how many of these companies come in and crash, another one comes in and does the same thing. And so you've got ESL, who are like the evil fucking empire, the overlords that just rule over it. They're 80% of the calendar, and then, it's Face It, and then it isn't, and then it's Blast, and maybe it won't be. And, everyone's trying to do the same thing, basically.
Which is fine. But then if you're looking at that relationship with sports, the thing with sports most sports have some sort of centralized league. I mean, fair enough. If you look at what tea are you drinking? I'm jealous of your tea.
Well, it's I've just got cold water on the bag now, but this is, and I can definitely recommend it.
That's a good fun night out. Cold water on the bag, by the way.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I just get the most out of it at Pucker, but this is their Feel New brand, because I've had a bit of upset stomach the last few days.
You're definitely ready for the major if you're drinking Feel New tea.
Well, yeah, it's aniseed, cardamom, and fennel.
That sounds like a terrible shot in a bar. I mean, you look at sports, and everyone has a centralized league. There is some sort of league, isn't there? I mean, fair enough. You get breakaway leagues every now and again, but there's always something which defines a season. And I always felt that there should be a defined season within Counterstrike, because otherwise those storylines are just repeated ad infinitum. And I respect, I respect everyone who works in those scenes and their ability to tell those stories and still find the interest and find the different bits there and there. And I if I ever work on an event again, I'm sure I'll be able to find them myself. But I look at it and I think, I remember there was a couple of events, and it was so interesting. It was the dominance, it was the money of FaZe against the dominance of Astralis. And there was these really clearly defined, and the heritage of NIP and all these different things coming in, there's an American team. Look at Liquid, aren't they getting great? And then I came back in, I hadn't done an event for like 8 months. And I came back in and I was like, but this is the same storyline, just with different teams playing different roles. And I think it will get better. Maybe it has got better. Maybe you can tell me.
It's been weird. COVID's kicked the ass out of the value and the product, and some of that's fine. I mean, we're still doing better than the mainstream media. Fucking Stephen Colbert, his boomer ass couldn't figure out how to use a fucking webcam, and god awful monologues where he would do laughter pauses when there's no fucking audience there. We're ahead of the mainstream media now in the COVID era. Because
maybe you are the mainstream media.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, some people might make that argument, but unfortunately, the other side to that is energy. You don't have crowds. Commentating in front of a crowd is like nothing else. Getting that feedback loop of the excitement of the moment, your excitement turbocharging the fan excitement.
Yeah.
And then the players realizing they've just done something exciting, and so the energy is unbelievably different. And commentators that we've got in esports do their best work in that environment. We've been denied that. We've been denied people in the studio for a large part of it, even people meeting face to face, So it's like Frankie's interviewing someone via webcam. She's got to throw to commentators via webcam. The feed's slightly delayed because internet. And, so the product's been a little bit worse overall. And also, it's been easier to produce on a regular basis.
How'd you fix it then? How'd you fix it?
Some of these motherfuckers have got to die. Some of their businesses have got to go under. I think there are two. It was, look, we've got this delicious banquet laid out, right? And instead of us all sitting around a table politely with our napkins tucked in and going, pass the salt, pass the cream, pass the sugar. That's delicious. Oh, try some of the peach cobbler, whatever. Instead, what we've done is one guy comes in and mashes it all up into brown pulp. They throw it in a trough and then go, right, there you go. And these companies are the fucking pigs. They're the hogs at the trough. They're elbowing each other, biting each other, to get out the way. And I get it. I understand how capitalism works. I'm not fucking stupid. But as somebody that cares about endemic esports and the esports landscape, sometimes competition creates problems. And I think basically we've left it too long to fix Counterstrike now. It'll be Valorant that hopefully, Riot will just control all of that. So the only hog at the trough will be them.
So you're talking about communism then?
I mean, sure. But obviously that's an absurd premise as well. What I'm talking about is companies understanding the responsibility to ecosystems that are bigger than them. I get it. ESL, you're hugely important to esports. I get it. Blast, you're hugely important. I get it. Face, hugely important. PGL, you're hugely important. But you will kill the game. You are going to kill it, and then you have nothing. And that's always been my stance.
True, but A, that is capitalism, but B, rapacious capitalism. But B, how do you get everyone around the table to come up with some sort of season? Do you come up with a season which is 8 months long, maybe? That everyone gets 2 months of the season.
Valve could do it anytime they want, but they won't. Because obviously they control the IP. So imagine if Mr. Football, right, who invented the football, had
He's such a dick, Mr. Football.
Yeah, and he had complete control over what leagues could play in what countries and everything. Imagine a setting like that. So yeah, Valve could do it, but also as well. I know that the company that loses the business, it's going to suck, but we're going to have to someone's going to have to do some belt tightening somewhere. It's like I say, I think it's too late for CS. I've been saying this for a long time. Too many problems. The online era killed us. Hopefully the major's going to see us bounce back, but I think realistically the major might be a farewell rather than a resurgence.
If I may give you my non-expert advice, and my expert opinion, not advice, that's the wrong word. Expert opinion is I don't think there's any game that's as simple to understand for somebody who doesn't understand esports as CSGO. Yeah, I think the beauty of CSGO is the fact that it's 5-on-5. You know, you die, you're out. You defuse the bomb, you win. It's the simplicity is so brilliant. You start looking at Valorant or anything else, Overwatch or those sort of things, to the casual non-gaming player or somebody who doesn't understand those games. It's the same with League of Legends for me and things like that. Is you have to understand the game so deeply to understand what's not just to understand who's going to win, but just even what's fucking going on. With Counterstrike, you can show that to somebody. I could show it to my mum, who admittedly has played games her life, but like I could show it to somebody who doesn't understand games, and you would literally say, you watch it. And you've got observers who are brilliant at following what's going on and showing the scene. You've got casters who are great at explaining what's happening. You've got analysts who are brilliant and hosts who are great at asking great questions. I think what you've got within CSGO, the reason I think it has a great fusion, it still will be the one esport to rule them all. If you will allow me the Lord of the Rings reference,
always
is that it has that. And I think, yes, it's maybe a period of churn. And I don't watch a lot of Counterstrike. I don't watch a lot of anything. I just never have done. This is nothing against Counterstrike. It's nothing against Call of Duty. It's nothing against rugby or anything. I don't have the time and I don't have the mentality for it. So I tend to gen up before I do a job, and I tend to follow things via the internet and clips and and things like that. But I just think it has the greatest ability to transcend esports.
And none of what you've said is wrong, but the difference now is that mattered in 2015. That doesn't matter heading into 2022 as much as it used to. The casual audience we've been courting historically for 10 years, they're here now. We've converted about as many as we're going to convert. Gaming's become more and more ubiquitous. Zoomer culture and the way they express themselves and jokes and memes and how they use social media and how they interface with influencers, that's all changed very drastically and rapidly. And Valorant is at the cutting edge of all of that. Valorant is going to gain so much popularity just because it is snowballing popularity. It's going to have a core audience. And it's...
Is that not what people said about Overwatch, though?
Well, not me. I called Overwatch's bullshit right from the start. The difference is Valorant... But
it was snowballing popularity.
Well, they were trying to, but they had a terrible game, a terrible idea for a league. They had no grassroots, and they were already treating their IP as if it was ingrained in culture, and it wasn't.
First time I played Overwatch, I thought, you know what, I jumped on, and I'm a console player, shoot me down, Zeus, hit me with a bolt right now when I say I use a pad. And I remember getting a copy of Overwatch. I loaded it up, and it took it was one of those, like the bane of the console players. It took me, I think that's ridiculous, a couple of hours to download it, to copy it onto the console. I was like, right. And I got my eldest daughter to sleep. It was years and years ago. And I got her to bed. I was like, right, I sat down, bottle of wine, bang, here we go. And as I went to play it, immediately there was like an update. Right. And that was like another hour. So wine. Was pretty drunk by this point. Jumped on, played as Bastion, the robot guy.
Oh, yeah.
Fucking 56-0, 56 kills, no deaths. I was like, I found my game. I was still in the training mode, hadn't realized.
Oh my God.
It was that moment I was like, yeah, OJ, you need to stop drinking and go to bed.
Yeah. Oh, just don't play Overwatch.
Or maybe that.
Yeah. I mean, look, I do get what you're saying. I see the point. And there's a lot of people who say these things blow up quicker, as we've seen with Valorant, but they live shorter lives. They're like the Roy Batty of esports, But I think Valorant's going to be different. And I look at everything Riot have done, and it pains me to say, because they're an awful company with horrible people that work there. But they when it comes to their esports output, they have done everything right the past 2 years, and they continue to excel while other developers are dropping the ball very badly. And that I cannot see Valorant not being the dominant FPS in 2 years' time.
Just tears in the rain.
Yep, I'm afraid so, brother. Well, look, I know we're getting to the end of our time, and so there's one thing I did want to do that was on my little list that I've been looking at while we've been chattering away, because a lot of people always ask me about expertise, right? And they always say, like, could you give me any advice for being a journalist or a host or whatever it is. So I think the hardest job, and I've done it, is when you get up on stage and you have to interact with a crowd, and you have to interview players. I think that's actually the hardest job in esports. So your top tips for the people that are watching this: how can someone be the next OJ Borg D'Anastasi?
Be yourself. Absolutely be yourself. I have worked in front of a fair few crowds in my life. I've done different crowds here or there. The best crowds I've ever worked in front of have been esports crowds. They're just wonderful. They're nice. They're welcoming. They always have been. I mean, I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, esports, it's a bear pit." Never found it. Never absolutely found it. Go on stage, be warm, don't be aggressive, understand where your audience is, and just be yourself. Just absolutely be yourself. Remember, the person you're interviewing, people are more interested in hearing their answer than your question. Don't ask a long question that has to prove how much you know about the scene. I mean, the one thing that frustrates me slightly about interviewers is where, and I think it happens sometimes because people want to prove that they understand the world they're coming from. But realistically, it doesn't fucking matter how much you know as an interviewer. Just ask a question, you know. And I can be guilty of, how do you feel? I understand. I can be guilty of that. Yeah. I don't always think that it's wrong to ask, how do you feel? I absolutely don't. And I know it became a bit of a thing where people were like, "Oh, it's such a lazy question." It's not a lazy question, because the emotions of somebody who's just won $1 million on an esports stage is as important as how they won the $1 million, because you're talking about somebody who's winning a life-changing amount of money. So remember, it's about the person you're interviewing. And other than that, I don't know. It took me a long time to be who I am and to do what I do. Remember, the people who are in front of you don't hate you. Unless they do hate me, in which case, fuck you.
Any chance you're coming back to an esports event in the next year or two?
If somebody asks me, I'm all over it. I haven't stepped away from esports. What I did in esports just isn't there anymore. No one needs a stage host for an empty arena. I did that. Do you know what I did in the last event just before COVID hit? I did a whole stage hosting gig in an empty arena in Katowice, and it was like, it was a bit weird.
Yeah, that must be a fucking nightmare.
But I love it. I've always loved it. I love it.
You must like catch yourself. That's like some Kafka-esque, like existential, like what the, my brain wouldn't allow me to do it properly.
It was at one point I was like, "Are you ready?" I was like, "OJ, what the fuck are you doing? Stop saying, are you ready?
Make some noise.
Make some noise." I can't hear you. Lord. Mate, I would love to. I would absolutely love to, because, as I say, the people I have met through esports, you know, Moses, Yanko, Alex, Henry, all these people, they are some of the best people I've ever met. Pansy, you know, I love them dearly. So for me, when I stepped out of what was my real life, because my real life is, you know, family, marriage, couple of kids. I'm not saying it's a bad life. It's a great life. I love my life, but it was a great way to come and experience something else. And I loved every moment of it. And whether I do it again or not do it again, what I have and will do and have done in esports has been some of the best stuff I've ever done. So
yeah, well,
if you ask me again, I'd be back.
I agree with that. And I hope, even though I keep saying that the major is going to be my last event, I have to do one more, because Harry and Hugo and
I love Harry and Hugo.
I know they're great.
I love Harry and Hugo.
Those guys want to do an event with me in person, because we've only done one event together, and it was online. So if we do that, I'll give you a call and we'll see if we can get you in on mates rates or something.
Listen, even if you don't, even if I just turn up just to see you guys, I want to come to an event, because it's been a long time. So yeah, and also we've only ever met once.
I know. Well, in person, yeah. There was the like I said, it was that long late night. Tell you what, mate, as I said at the time, you can fucking hold your liquor, by the way. I don't know how you do it, because you're such a thin, fit guy. But
mate, I'm 16 stone. Listen, I'm 100 kilos of uselessness.
You went fucking pint for pint with me, and I've got I'm built like a fucking barrel, you know? It's ridiculous. Man. So fair play, brother. I'll give you that.
You're the Zangief of esports.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
The Zangief.
Yeah. So look, mate, just one last thing, obviously, before we go and do the sign off. You know, I'm sure there'll be some people that miss you. So just plug your radio show. Like, how can the Zoomers find out about radio?
As if they're going to listen to radio too. But BBC Sounds app, I'm on midnight till 3 UK time, Monday to Friday, which is sort of Sunday night to Friday night, to Thursday night. So you can find me there. Hey, one question I would like to ask you. It's just one last question.
Yeah, go on.
I can hear my oldest child, who I've not put to bed, staggering around outside, so I'll have to go in a second.
Yeah, no
That
worries.
is, so I do lots of work for Zwift at the moment. Now, Zwift is online cycling, and it's on a platform, and we have lots and lots of stuff like that. What's your feelings on Zwift as an esport?
I mean, listen, I have seen it. I always think the problem that stuff like that has is people say, well, why wouldn't they just do the real thing? Why have this digital component to it? And because, and I'll tell you why. Here you go. So I have a family. I don't have the time to go bike race. I'm also freelance. I can't fall off a bike, and I never have bike raced in my life. But what I have done is play computer games, and I love cycling. So you put the two together, and you can do these great online races. And within each race, there is meta. You have power-ups you can use, which is, you have aero power-ups, you have stuff like that. So it's the meta that you have to be able to. The best cyclist doesn't always win a Zwift race. It's somebody who is A, physically fit, and B, understands the platform and the gaming around it. Yeah. So what is your thought on that? Well, I think it's fascinating. I mean, I've seen a lot of physical attempts to bring physicality to esports for a variety of reasons. Some people because they think esports bad and you're not going to be fit and all that stuff.
Oh, they're all fit. All the esports are fit.
Yeah, and other people because they think just moving a mouse isn't particularly stressful or strenuous. So there's been this big push for as long as I've been in esports, frankly, to find something. But yeah, I checked it out, like I did with the iRacing stuff as well, and I think it has like there's something there. I don't know if it's the broadcasts that are maybe not making it pop off for me. But I think in terms of like what people do, like in that competitive environment, it's fucking crazy. Because like you say,
we've got a race. We've got to get you into Malika.
Brother.
We've got to jump on a bike, and I got to take you for a race.
Bro, I can barely walk down to the fucking end of my drive without getting a sweat on me. What?
Shock horror. His drive's 9 miles long.
It's not. I wish. But yeah, look there. Let's do it. I mean, obviously the Zwift stuff is something that I'm monitoring with interest. Maybe we can work an event together for that.
With the World Championships next year.
Hey, that would be brilliant. Out of my comfort zone, I could be a sideline reporter. I could do anything. So
the thing is that once again, it's about sporting drama. It's about sporting stories.
Oh yeah,
it's all about stories. But yeah, mate.
Any like you said succinctly before, any sport has that moment, right? And I'm the same. As a writer, I look for the stories. I can find the stories. So there'll definitely be a Zwift story. I mean, the idea as well is that when you're doing an interview afterwards, I imagine these people are fucking knackered.
Yeah. Sweating all over the place. But yeah, I love it. But mate, I've loved this. Thank you so much for asking me. I've really enjoyed this. And when you asked me and you said we're going to do an hour and a half, I was like, there ain't no way. I've never spoken for an hour and a half in my life. We've done an hour and more than a half. Yeah.
So, well, that's because you're a fascinating guy and a good person to speak to, a good friend and an asset to any sport that you work in. So thanks so much for being generous with your time. And to everyone there he is. It's OJ Borg. You can catch him on Radio 2. You can catch him on Twitter. Improve his socials so the Americans think that he matters, maybe. Go follow him on Twitter. It'll be on your screen.
I need 20,000, thank you, so I can make it to a major broadcast. I'm still at 19.5.
I think we can get there after this. And yeah, go show him some support and love. And that was the Richard Lewis Show this time around. I don't know when the next episode will be. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that Zoomer shit. When the one comes around, it'll be another fascinating guest. But no one as cheeky and charming as OJ Borg, of course. So make sure until then, you take care of yourself. Goodbye.